Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. During COVID, I moved into a small, maybe 30 homes, lakefront subdivision in Texas with a fairly inactive HOA primarily run by retired homeowners. Of course, 18 months in, a large tree fell on my home and caused significant roof damage. Being a novice homeowner, I wasn't aware that cement tile roofs are quite expensive to replace and to obtain 100 replacement cost, and I've been battling with the insurance company for 16 months and won over, promising roofer, through appeals and now finally the last piece, an appraisal. I'm in a bad position because there is a $100K difference between the contractor and the insurance, but that is a story for another day. The HOA has sent me 2 letters, the first with 3 issues. 1. A political sign. 2. Roof repairs not being made by 6 months after the tree fall, and 3 are septic-connected sprinklers smelling. They threaten to report me to the tech rather than argue with them over the legality of the sign. By the way, the no sign policy has an unwritten exception for church signs. I removed it. I fired our septic maintenance person, who is the same one the HOA president next door uses, and hired a new one and had the tank pumped. I have 0 experience with septic and the connected sprinklers. Also, I've noticed other neighbors' sprinklers stinking from time to time. Fast forward several months later, and unfortunately the insurance issue is still slow going. Last week I received a letter they would start fining me $50 a month for both lots I own, even the one the house isn't on, beginning in March 2024. That is fine with me. I suspect the repairs will be done by then. But then my dad came across the HOA president in my yard yesterday with another individual, and they said unspecified neighbors complained about a mold smell and they were testing. Dad was nice to them, said let us know, and left it at that. But I'm livid. 1. I do have allergies, but I smell nothing. 2. Do they have a right to just come into my yard? 3. I suspect the complaint is the HOA tiring of looking at my tarps, which are quite ugly. At the end of the day, I have an open insurance claim, and I don't have a spare 100K a 200K total to replace this ridiculous cement tile roof. I admit I have made mistakes along the way with the insurance selection, roofer selection, maybe buying this home in the first place. I have loved lakeside living, and I'm 2 doors down from my sister, which has been lovely. Anyway, thanks if you have read this far. I can't keep beating myself up over this. This incident happened in January of this year. Last year, I moved into a neighborhood with an optional HOA. At the time, I'd come into enough money to buy a house outright. The only reason I moved here is because the HOA was optional, and it's a nice, safe neighborhood. It's a slice of heaven compared to where I used to live. I own 2 vehicles, a 2004 Toyota Camry and a 1999 Ford F-150. The Camry is my daily driver, while the F-150 is my hauler for when I need it. I bought the truck around the same time I bought the house to help with the move, and I used it to pull a rented trailer when I was moving my stuff in. The F-150 is old, but in good mechanical order, and I try to keep both of my vehicles clean with monthly trips through a car wash. The local HOA did not like me from the start due to my refusal to join. The HOA president was a retired old man who seemed like he had nothing better to do. So he tried multiple times to sell me on joining and sent me several applications in the mail. But I always declined. Politely at first, but when the president got more aggressive, I told him to shove it where the sun doesn't shine. That's when the HOA decided that I was a member anyway and started sending me fines in the mail with that claim. I knew they were bogus, so I went to the next HOA meeting to dispute the fine. They tried to tell me that by living here, I'm in the HOA whether I liked it or not. This was an obvious power move, something I was ready for. I could only laugh in amazement of their stupidity and said as much to them. Then told the board that not only was I not a member, but I'd gotten a lawyer to write up a C&D for them. I handed the envelope over. The board skimmed it, then furiously told me to get out. The fine stopped for a few months, then started right back up again at random. So I popped into another HOA meeting and told them this was not legal. I'm not in their HOA, and I'd take them to court if they didn't stop. And once again, I was furiously told to get out. The fine stopped for good, but the HOA president decided I needed to be made an example of. It happened only a few days later. I came home to find my phone 150 gone from my driveway. I checked my cameras and saw the HOA president himself walk onto my property. He took out a pocket knife and stabbed each of my truck's tires in the sidewalls, then unscrewed the license plates off, put them in a bag, and just casually walked away with them. Then a little while later, a tow truck came and hauled my truck away. I called the police, and together we went to see the HOA president. But he wasn't home. With my situation explained, this was not considered a civil matter, but grand theft auto. The police traced the tow truck as being from a local junkyard and not from an impound lot. I accompanied the police there. Not only was the HOA president present at the junkyard, but my phone 150 was there being taken apart by about 4 men. They'd already removed the headlights, hood, bumper, radiator, and all of the panels off the front of the truck by the time we'd gotten there. There was stuff disconnected all over the engine bay, and the catalytic converters had already been cut out. The HOA president looked like a deer in headlights when he saw me there with police. I was nearly angry beyond words when I saw my truck in that condition. Nearly, I say, because I went off like a foul-mouthed country sailor on the people who had ripped my truck apart. The HOA president was caught red-handed, but insisted he'd only towed my truck because it was in a sorry state and looked abandoned. I said he illegally took it off my private property since the HOA had no right to tow off my land, and he clearly had not been aware of my cameras, as they'd seen everything he did. He went pale at first, then furiously tried to stomp towards me, looking like he was ready for a fight while yelling my truck had been an eyesore, so he got rid of it. This action earned him some new bracelets and a free ride to the station. The police were somewhat merciful to the junkyard staff, who claimed to have only been doing their job. The owner of the junkyard is a cousin to the HOA president, so he was contracted to do any towing for the HOA, since he also owned a local impound. He had no idea I wasn't a member of the HOA, and also was not aware his cousin had ordered his employees to tear my truck apart for parts as an abandoned vehicle. The police cited all sorts of broken laws to the employees and owner, and then they agreed to put my truck back together. But I said that it had better be at least as good as it was, if not better, or I'd be going to my lawyer. The owner told his employees to do whatever it takes, or he'd separate them from their job. Then told me he'd bill the HOA president for everything later. Then the police and I got to watch as all of those employees had to painstakingly put my truck back together piece by piece. And they repeatedly muttered things about me to each other and flashed me the stink eye from time to time. I'm guessing the HOA president offered to bribe them all to take my truck apart as quickly as possible. But now they had to fix it for free. And they were at it for hours. They had to weld the catalytic converters back in, and even had to replace some parts entirely due to damage caused during hasty disassembly. When they first fired up the engine, it had an obvious misfire. They denied it, but police sided with me that they could tell it had a misfire too. Turns out they ruined one of the coil packs taking the truck apart, and they had to order new parts from a nearby auto parts store to fix it. One of the headlights also stopped working. Again, something that they had to fix because I stated I could prove with my home cameras that they were both working when I last drove it. And the bulbs were nearly brand new LED. So they had to have broken something. The coolant lines had also been just cut instead of simply disconnected, probably because they were trying to take the truck apart in a hurry. So those were more parts that had to be ordered from the nearby store as well. I can only imagine the total cost that was billed to the HOA president for this. All 4 of the tires had to be replaced because they were not repairable. So they had to leave the truck on a lift and take all 4 wheels off. There were other problems too. And all of these junkyard mechanics had to work overtime to put the truck back together on the hopes I wouldn't sue or press charges. I wasn't even able to take the truck home till the next day evening because the police had to get my plates back and the junkyard staff had to take the wheels in for new tires. By the time I got the truck back, the 2 junkyard employees I saw there gave me looks that just said not to come back. And the truck actually runs better than before. So I essentially got a free, sorta, overhaul for my trouble. As for the HOA president, well, I did sue him for trespassing, theft, destruction of property, and the illegal tap. He ended up paying his cousin for all of my truck repairs, lost his position in the HOA, and moved out of the neighborhood shortly after losing the lawsuit because he had no leg to stand on in court since everything was caught on CCTV. He pretty much surrendered to the ask for settlement, which is why it didn't get drawn out. The HOA has not bothered me at all since the truck incident. And my neighbors loved me for getting rid of the old HOA president, as he was a power, tripping narcissists to them all, and kept issuing pointless fines that had to be regularly disputed. Also, I've been back to that junkyard for parts. But for my Camry instead, as I went to pull a replacement grill for it and found one in excellent shape there. They did recognize me and gave me dirty looks, but otherwise didn't bother me. Hey there, I'm back with another long one. This one has been going on for a decade, and I am personally very proud of how it turned out. A little over 10 years ago, when I was a young carpenter, I met a guy who I'll call Chad. Chad was a new hire by the company I was working for and became my helper. We got along famously even though he was 10 years older than me. He didn't mind working under a 23-year-old carpenter as an apprentice. Chad and I had worked together for 6 months when he brought up the idea of starting a business together. He figured between the two of us we could easily run a crew and build houses. After talking it over with my pregnant partner, we decided that it would be better for me to be an employee, but still a 50 partner for tax reasons and insurance purposes. Chad said that was fine with him. So we started laying out who would take care of certain aspects of the business. Chad was to be the guy to find work, as I look way younger than I am, and it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the client to think their framer is 16. Chad was also to take care of payroll, insurance, and any other financial factions. My duties were simple: staff and run the crew and keep on budget, something that came easy to me. I was to be paid an hourly wage, as well as 50 of profit after all business expenses. I never took my profit draw, as I rolled it back into growing the company. Things were great for about 6 months. The crew was working well together. We had a few houses under our belts and a contract for a 10,000 square foot custom house with multiple outbuildings. Things were great. So Chad has never built a foundation, and we usually hired a crew to put the foundation in for us, as like I said, Chad has never built one, and I personally hate concrete work. We couldn't get our normal foundation crew in, so I stepped up and said, screw it, I'll do it myself. The company we were building for is one of the best custom home builders around, and doing a good job on this house could mean that we wouldn't have to pound the pavement looking for work. Work would be given to us. Perfect arrangement. Until it wasn't. Chad started spending money like it was going out of style. He sold his 2500 Chevy pickup and bought a new Jeep Wrangler. He had the Jeep for about a month before he sank it in water while forks foring, and it caught on fire mysteriously a few days after. He received the insurance payout and bought a brand new Dodge 2500 Power Wagon, which he, in short order, sunk in water within a few weeks. I never noticed the red flags as Chad and I rarely spoke face to face. He was the business side. I was the get stuff done side. I finished the foundation and picked up the check from the builder. The builder said that we overbilled him by 25, but he was happy with the work I done, but not to overbill again, as he doesn't like overpaying, as there may not be any money left at the end of the build. I apologized and asked him to cancel the check and issue one for the work actually completed. He agreed too and said, I'm so happy to have honest people working for me. I usually don't pick up the checks, nor did I ever really look at the books, as it wasn't in the scope of my responsibilities. This prompted me to log onto our corporate account and see that we are so far in the red that we couldn't afford to buy a red pen, let alone cover payroll. I showed up at Chad's house and tore a strip off of him. He apologized and promised to top up the account with his personal profit draw money. I went into work Monday to find the locks on our tool bin had been changed, my name removed from all accounts, and a letter taped to the tool bin stating I was dismissed from my duties for an undisclosed reason. I was furious. I was not aware that as a business partner I could be fired. I found another job quite quickly and tried my best to put it behind me. That's when I found out where the money was going, and that Chad had been slandering my name around town, blaming me for the missing money, as well as a bunch of egregious statements about my work ethic, trade skills, mental stability, and home life. Now, I fastidiously tracked all of our interactions with a simple journal and had backups of the transactions of our business account. I also happened to have backups of all our texts, voicemails, and pictures of everything. This is the revenge part. I took the evidence to my father's lawyer friend who started a fraud embezzlement investigation through the CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, Canada's IRS, and called the insurance provider to make sure they were being paid. They had never received anything. I called the builder whom we were building for and explained what was happening. He told me that Chad had essentially stolen around $30,000 for payment of work not completed, and had broken into their office and stolen another $15,000, replacement value of equipment and tools. I did what anyone would do. I called the police. Police said they couldn't help me and said it was a civil case. And the builder said he wasn't going to sue, as Chad had no money, and it wasn't worth the headache. So I called his auto insurance company, sent them all the pictures of his sunk vehicles, texts about them, and a short video he sent of him lighting the Jeep on fire. Insurance company filed charges against Chad and won. Chad is on the hook for around $130,000. I've spent the last 9.5 years telling anyone who'll listen about Chad, and I have had him essentially blacklisted from the carpentry industry around here. I've also looked up his criminal history, as it is public domain every 3 months or so, and make a point of showing up at his court proceedings, or offering myself as a character reference for the Crown prosecution. So I've gone out of my way to remind Chad that he can't screw me over without repercussions. And no, this doesn't end here. Years have passed, and I'm still mad. I received a call from a guy offering me a job. It was the builder that Chad screwed over, not remembering that we know each other after I explained who I was, and this bridge is burnt due to Chad. He still offers me the job. Medical, dental, company van, gas card, corporate credit card. I accepted his offer. First order of business finds another way to screw with Chad. Through the grapevine, I find where he's living and working. New boss calls the company Chad is working for, and we found out that he is summarily fired. I get in touch with his landlord, explain how he operates, and Chad is evicted for unpaid rent. He was apparently a couple months behind. I also managed to get his girlfriend's phone number, call her and explain what this guy does to people, and his extensive criminal history including, but not limited to fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, his many assaults, and his wanted picture published in the paper. Turns out she is the owner of his truck, primary operator, but he pays the insurance. He cannot insure a vehicle until he pays off what he owes for the fraud. She asks me what she should do. I say that I'll take care of it. I call the insurance provider, explain what is going on, for them to tell me he doesn't even have a license anymore. They void the insurance on his girlfriend's truck after speaking to her and set up a sting with the police. I personally got to be involved as I knew what was going on. So I sit and wait for the day it goes down. I roll up behind the unmarked police cruiser and quickly explain who I am and what my plans are. The police are thinking that they are just waiting to pull him over for driving without a license and no insurance. I said I'm going to call him immediately as soon as I see him. So he comes cruising out and I make the call. He actually picked up the phone to call me a bunch of names and the N-word, I am as white as the fresh fallen snow, and promptly gets pulled over. Police issue a ticket for reckless driving, no seatbelt, no license, and using a handheld device. During this, the girlfriend pulls up and proceeds to give consent to search her truck. In the truck, they find multiple IDs, stolen credit cards, a couple ATM skimmer machines, and a fake police badge. He was arrested on the spot. Revenge over, right? Nope. Police then asked to search the residence he was living at. He moved into the girlfriend's house after I had him evicted from his own place. In the garage, they find a vast collection of stolen tools, a lot of which belonged to the builder I was working for, from when he broke into their office, and they were all stupidly still labeled with the company's inventory control stickers. This brought on more charges, and he was remanded in police custody until his trial date. Well, justice is sometimes slow here in Canada, and his trial date was at the time 17 months into the future. Well, yesterday was his trial date, so my boss, who Chad ripped off, Chad's ex-girlfriend and I attended the hearing, just to see the man squirm. His judgment was 8 years in jail, after being granted time and a half for time served, a $100,000 fine, 1,000 hours community service after release, and no possibility of parole. I got to watch him be taken away in chains twice. Never underestimate the fury of a quiet man. And screw Chad. This happened several years ago. I was a photographer for a major theme park and have dealt with my fair share of entitled Karens Brads. But there's only been one time I've had to call security because of Karen. I was working with a character one afternoon, and one of the families that stopped by to pay a visit was this family of 3 with mom, dad, and a 5-year-old boy that I'll name Malcolm. Malcolm is strapped to a harness attached to mom's waist. Think those jogging harnesses for blind runners, to keep him close to mom and dad. Before the session, Dad pulled the character attendant and me aside and alerted us that Malcolm was a non-verbal, autistic in camera, flashes were overstimulating to him. Now, this was a pretty common request, so I adjusted my settings so I wouldn't have to use the flash and thanked him for alerting me. It's Malcolm's turn, and he was such a sweetheart. He just wanted to show off the book full of pictures of his favorite dinosaurs, and we all got sad when he had to leave. A few hours later, I was in an area we refer to as backstage, where guests aren't allowed, heading to my break. Imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I get body slammed by Malcolm. For the record, I'm almost 6'F and 250 lbs, and he nearly managed to knock me over. He's screaming and crying. Fortunately, my manager, Oscar, was nearby, so I flagged him down and we immediately called security. We get Malcolm to a cool, air-conditioned place, as it's 95 and I looked up pictures of dinosaurs on my phone to show Malcolm. Eventually, he calmed down and he essentially became my little buddy. About 10 minutes later, Malcolm is reunited with a tearful mom and dad. It's there we got the full story. Enter Karen. Mom, Dad, and Malcolm were getting ice cream when Karen approached. The conversation went roughly as followed. Karen, why is he harnessed? Mom, oh, he's autistic and he will bolt if he's not harnessed. Karen, no, he's not. Mom, excuse me? Karen, you're just a bad parent. My grandson knows better than to stray from me and he's about the same age. Mom, I'm sorry, but he's incapable of understanding that. It's safer for everyone if he is harnessed. It's at this point that Dad comes back with the ice cream, and Mom turns her attention away to help him. The next thing she knows, the harness goes slack. When she looked up, Malcolm and Karen were gone. It's so packed that day that it's easy to lose track of someone, especially if it's a running child. An important thing to note is that the park has cameras everywhere, so it was easy to get a video of the incident and get a description of Karen. Security was alerted and Karen tracked down. She was belligerent and tried to slap the security guard who stopped her, stupidly doing it in front of an OC sheriff. So she got a lovely court date for assault as a result. Malcolm and his family were given an extra day added to their tickets as an apology for what happened. But they just had one request. They asked to know where I would be the next day so I could take their pictures. The next day, I gave them a full-on photo shoot. And yes, it was the best day of my entire career. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. I'm 27-year-old female. Context. My relationship with my mother, age 58, became complicated after she started dating and later married her current husband, who is 15 years her senior. My mom became toxic towards me and my older sister when we opposed her getting remarried, mostly because of her drastic change in personality. We had a falling out a day before her wedding, and we went no contact for a few months and limited contact later on. During that time, I started going to therapy in order to process what happened and learn to set boundaries with my mom. We've been trying to slowly patch up our relationship, but it's been difficult mostly due to my mom's behavior. My mom mostly blames me for what happened and still holds the opinion that I started everything. The situation. I'm currently in a financial crisis. I had to drop out of community college in order to work full-time to support myself. However, I've made a lot of mistakes in the job searching process because of my mistakes and lack of experience. Because of my lack of employment and routine, my mental health has suffered a lot. I'm currently low on savings, and if I don't start working, I'm going to be in more trouble than I'm in right now. I've tried doing Dr. Dash, but I've mostly made peanuts. Most of my earnings go into my gas tank. I just got a job offer at a pizza place that I'm going to start pretty soon. Even though I'm relieved to have a job, I feel a bit defeated as well. I feel terrible that I couldn't get a job sooner. I also feel bad that I couldn't secure a better job offer and turn down offers that would have benefited. I told my mom that I felt sad that I wasn't able to get myself a better job, but my mom said that I should work my way up through multiple jobs over the next few years. I don't want to work this pizza job forever. I want to figure out a way to get out of my situation and into a better paying job. I know that this will take some time. I'm nearly 30, and I can't keep jumping from one job to the next over the next few years. I want to figure out a way to get myself into at least a better paying job that's entry level at best. My mom acts like I just want a high-paying job handed to me on a silver platter. I don't want to be a manager. I just want to find a job where I can build some experience. I'm also a single woman, so I need to find a way to support myself since I'm not married. Because of the below-zero temperature weather in January, my electric bill skyrocketed. Because of the low state of my savings, I asked my mom if she could help me with my bill, and she refused, saying that I just needed to take money out of savings and just do Dr. Dash. Just to make it clear, I hate asking for money, so I was swallowing my pride when I did this. My reason for doing this was so that my lights wouldn't get turned off. I could use the money in my savings for rent, and so I could use my DoorDash money to feed me and my dog. With my mom, she's in no financial crisis. In fact, she's living her best life. Her new hubby pays for my grandmother's nursing home expenses. She gets to go shopping for new home decor, and they bought a new house in the mountains. She and her hubby used to live in a big city, but they decided to move because things were getting too expensive. My mom doesn't have to work if she doesn't want to, and she always seems to be traveling. She's going on a mission trip to Cuba. She's always bragging about her new house, how pretty everything is, how she loves buying coffee from the Buck, ease down the road, how everyone is conservative, and how cheap everything is. Even though it's great she's happy, it feels like she's constantly bragging about it. She believes that I'm a spoiled child and that she's just disciplining me and showing me tough love. Even though she's trying to help me see the silver lining of the situation, I still feel like she's somewhat out of touch. My mom offered to let me live with her, but I don't want to go live with her. It's not that I don't want to live in the mountains, it's that I don't like her new husband and that I don't want to repeat what happened a few years ago. Also, I wouldn't be living with her for free. If I lived with her, I would have to pay rent to live in her guest room. I would also be nearly 2 hours away from my friends and other family members. I feel like living with my mom after what happened a few years ago would end up being like a stick of dynamite taking up residence in a matchbox. I'm desperately looking for a roommate, but most of my friends have roommates, have already renewed their leases, and are married. I can't live with my sister and her husband, and I can't live with my aunt and uncle because they're having family issues too. Please don't get me wrong. I love my mom, however trying to connect with her is frustrating. My sister and I have been carefully trying to patch things with our mom, and we don't want to fall back to square one. I apologize if this is lengthy, but I'd like to give context and background information. I, 24, have loved tattoos and piercings since I was a young teen. My mom, 54, has always had a hatred for any body modifications, hair cutting, dyeing, piercings, tattoos, particularly on me and my sister, which is off since my brother is a tattoo artist. She never explicitly explained why she doesn't like them or why she doesn't want me to have them, but when I would ask, she would basically shut the conversation down and said, because I said so. There have been several times in my life where I would try and rebel against her beliefs, which often lead to big fights. The biggest fight is when I was 19 and I really wanted to cut my hair short, to my shoulder. Up until this point, I always had long hair and my mom would always trim my hair. When I told her I wanted shorter hair, she got extremely mad and said, "No, you'll look like a boy." After days of trying to convince her, we agreed that I was allowed to cut my hair to my shoulder, blade. I accepted this because I knew this is the best outcome I could get. So she cut my hair and I was not satisfied with how it looked. I wanted it shorter like how I initially mentioned. The next day I went back to college, where I lived with my roommates at the time. I decided, fuck it, it's my hair and I want to love myself when I look in the mirror. So I went and got my hair cut a couple more inches to the desired length I wanted. I loved it. I felt so free and liberated. When my mom found out, she ripped me a new one. Called me disrespectful. She was hysterically crying, and she threatened to stop paying for my tuition and I would have to move back home. My dad reached out and told me I really upset her and I should apologize, which I did. I have massive guilt and pleasing issues with my mom. Anyhow, that is a little background info on how my mom typically responds to when I want to do things for myself. Fast forward to a couple of months ago. I decided I wanted to get another tattoo piece done. I have 2 other tattoos that my mom is aware of. With my other 2, my mom was very involved with the process. She decided size, placement, everything. I basically only got to decide what it looks like. I went along with this because I knew it was the only way I was going to get them. I'm not upset with how they turned out. I love them regardless. But mind you, I was 2020, when I got these done and paid for both of them myself. Now, with this third piece, I wanted to do this by myself as a 24-year-old who now lives on her own and makes her own money. When I told my mom, it turned into the biggest argument we had ever had. I have never heard my mom talk to me like this. She called me selfish, disrespectful, and accused me of only coming to visit her when I want to tell her bad news, getting a tattoo. She said she doesn't even recognize me anymore. This obviously upset me, and I left the room in tears. When I calmed down and came back to talk to her, she continued to lay into me about how I am ruining my body and how I am going to look on my wedding day, which, by the way, I am nowhere near getting married. I tried to explain to her that her words were upsetting me and I just want her to support and love me no matter what. She couldn't give me this reassurance and continued to play the victim as I am the one doing something terrible to her. I left her house very distraught. After a couple of days, we talked on the phone, but she never apologized or brought up that situation again. This is usually how it went. I ended up getting the tattoo, which I'm absolutely in love with. I hide it when I see my mom, but when she does see it, she ignores it. She has since made me promise to not get any more, which I did not agree to, of course. I want more and soon, but I am crazy worried about her reaction again. I love my mom and care what she thinks of me, and I want a good relationship with her. Why can't she accept all of me? Is this narcissistic behavior? Anyone else in a similar position, feeling lost and wanting to live my own life? Backstory. A couple of years ago, my family and I were enjoying a holiday in Yorkshire, wandering down a bustling, touristy high street. As we strolled along, we noticed a sizable crowd gathering ahead. Naturally, we gravitated toward the commotion. There, at the crossroads, a street performer had set up shop, impossible to miss. We grabbed some lunch and parked ourselves on a nearby bench, ready to be entertained. This street performer was the quintessential entertainer, jugging with fire and teasing with sword swallowing. The kind of act that appeared perilous but had been perfected through countless repetitions. Just as the performer was gearing up for the daring sword swallow, a figure emerged from the crowd, a Karen. Karen, in her infinite wisdom, couldn't help but scoff. This is so fake. I bet that sword bends or something. She proceeded to bulldoze her way to the front until she stood right next to the street performer. Street performer, unfazed, shot back, maybe it is. Would you like me to run it through your heart, and then we can debate whether it's fake or not? Karen shot him a look of pure indignation, as if he had committed a heinous act like pooping on her designer shoes. It's people like you who are ruining society, she retorted with an air of condescension. You probably don't even have an education. Street performer, with a wry smile, casually revealed, I'll have you know that I graduated from university majoring in engineering. But I didn't really enjoy it, so I turned to performing. Karen, still smirking, prodded further, and does performing provide you with enough money? Street performer, never one to shy away, responded, yes, it does. I have a house, a wife, and a child, so I'd say I'm pretty well off. How much do you earn, if you don't mind me asking? Karen muttered something barely audible given her standing in designer clothes. Street performer seized the moment. Well, then it looks like you'll be needing this, as he picked up a hat brimming with about Peps 200. Karen recoiled, horrified. I do not need your filthy stolen money, she retorted. I get all the money I need selling essential oils. Street performer couldn't resist the opportunity for a final jab. Yes, essential oils. Fragrance of fake and perfume de scam. I love your newest release, Ode to Pyramid Scheme. In that case, you won't be needing this, as he placed the hat back down. I will continue to perform here and laugh as you get on a bus and go home to watch TV and drink cheap wine, bought with your benefits. Karen's face flushed an even deeper shade of red, her rage intensifying. She couldn't let the street performer have the last word. In a fit of fury, she lunged at him, arms flailing wildly. Her attempt at an assault, however, ended in a spectacular tumble. Karen crashed to the ground, shattering a couple of her precious fragrance bottles, which emitted a cacophony of odorous chaos as they splintered. As Karen staggered to her feet, her anger had reached a boiling point. She seemed ready to unleash her fury on the street performer, but her menacing intentions were swiftly intercepted by the arrival of a pair of uniformed police officers. With stern voices, they warned her to cease her aggressive outburst. Ma'am, you need to calm down immediately, one officer firmly instructed. The other officer added, assaulting someone and causing property damage is not the way to resolve this. Karen, still fuming and now thoroughly embarrassed, reluctantly backed down. She was left seething, forced to abandon her vengeful pursuit under the watchful eyes of the law. The street performer, on the other hand, continued his act, now with an added sense of triumph, as Karen's ill-fated outburst had only elevated his status in the eyes of the crowd. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.